I stood in the doorway of the banquet hall, still holding my clutch purse, still wearing the blue dress I had pressed the night before, still feeling the warmth of the curling iron on my hair, and my daughter-in-law looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You're not supposed to be here. This isn't your event. Please leave." The room went quiet. 30-something women turned to look at me. Some I recognized, some I didn't. All of them were watching. My son was standing 6 feet away. He looked at the floor. Within 2 hours, I had made 7 phone calls, and what I did after that changed everything. But let me go back to the beginning, because this story didn't start that morning. It started 18 months earlier, on a Tuesday evening when my son called me from his apartment and told me he and his girlfriend were engaged. I remember exactly where I was standing, in my kitchen, stirring a pot of chicken soup, the radio playing softly in the background. When I heard his voice, excited, a little nervous, my heart filled up so completely I had to sit down. My son, my only child, getting married. His name is Daniel. He's 34 years old. He works in logistics, manages a small team, drives a sensible car, calls me every Sunday. I raised him alone after his father left when Daniel was 9 years old. We didn't have much money for a long time. There were years I worked 2 jobs. There were Christmases I wrapped the same gifts I had hidden away from the year before and hoped he wouldn't notice. But we made it. He made it. And I was prouder of him than I had words for. His fiancée's name was Kristen. I had met her 4 times before the engagement. Twice at family dinners I hosted, once at Daniel's birthday, and once for coffee. Just the 2 of us at her suggestion. That coffee meeting had seemed promising. She was polished, articulate, and attentive. She asked me about my work, my hobbies, my health. I drove home thinking she could be good for him. I found out later she spent most of that coffee meeting taking notes. Not about me, but about my house, my neighborhood, my retirement situation. She was doing inventory. I was too trusting to see it at the time. After the engagement, Kristen and Daniel came over for dinner. We sat around my dining room table and talked about the wedding. They had a vision, a venue with a garden, sit-down dinner for 80 guests, live music for the cocktail hour. Beautiful. I asked about their budget. Daniel looked at Kristen. Kristen looked at me. We were hoping, she said carefully, that family could contribute. My parents are helping with what they can, but they're not in a position to do much. We thought maybe, since you're comfortable. She let the sentence hang there. I was comfortable because I had worked for 40 years, lived modestly, paid off my mortgage, and kept a careful savings account. I was not wealthy, but I was stable, and I loved my son. "How much are we talking about?" I asked. The total they quoted was more than I had expected, but Daniel reached across the table and covered my hand with his and said, "Mom, you've given me everything my whole life. You don't have to do this, but it would mean the world to us." I said yes. I told them I would contribute $22,000. That was my ceiling, and I was clear about it. They thanked me. Kristen hugged me. Daniel looked relieved. I told myself this was what mothers did. This was love made practical. What followed over the next 14 months was a slow, steady erosion of every boundary I had set. It started small. Kristen began sending me invoices without asking first. Not requests, invoices. The florist, $82. The calligraphy for the invitations, $340. A bridal brunch she's decided to host at a restaurant, $620. Each time I mentioned that we had agreed on a total amount, she would respond with something like, "I just thought you'd want Daniel's wedding to be perfect," or, "I figured you'd rather know the real cost than have us struggle." I kept paying. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that once the wedding was over, things would settle. I kept believing that the woman my son had chosen was fundamentally reasonable. By the time I added everything up, 14 months later, sitting at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad, I had paid out $31,400, more than $9,000 over what I had agreed to. And I hadn't been invited to a single planning meeting, not the venue walkthrough, not the menu tasting, not the floral consultation, not the cake selection. When I asked Tristan once why she hadn't included me, she said sweetly that she didn't want to burden me with the details. She just wanted me to show up on the day and enjoy it. I told myself that was reasonable. I was wrong to tell myself that. The baby shower happened 6 weeks before the wedding. Kristen was not pregnant. The shower was for her college friend, a woman named Brooke, who was expecting in the spring. Kristen had offered to host it at a venue she liked, a private event space connected to a wine bar downtown. It had a minimum spend of $2,400. She called me the week before and explained the situation. Brooke was a dear friend. The other bridesmaids couldn't afford to split the cost. Would I be willing to cover it as a gift to Kristen, kind of an early wedding present? I said yes. I don't fully know why. I think by then I had been saying yes for so long that no felt like a foreign language. I booked the venue. I paid the deposit. I arranged the catering package. A lunch spread, dessert table, mimosas. I ordered a custom floral centerpiece because Kristen had mentioned Brooke loved peonies. I spent 2 evenings assembling gift bags. I drove them to Kristen's apartment the night before the shower so everything would be ready. On the morning of the shower, I got dressed carefully. I chose a soft rose-colored blouse, gray slacks, low heels. I did my makeup slowly, the way I used to when things felt worth the effort. I drove across town to the venue, found parking, and walked through the front door carrying a wrapped gift for Brooke and a card signed from Daniel and me. The room was already decorated. The flowers I had paid for were in the center of the room. The dessert table I had arranged was along the far wall. 20 or so women were scattered around in small groups, holding mimosas. Kristen was standing near the entrance talking to a small cluster of her friends. When she saw me, something shifted in her face. Not quite surprise, but something close to calculation. She walked toward me. She smiled. And then, quietly enough that only the women closest to us could hear, she said, "I thought Daniel told you. This is just for close friends and my bridal party. It's not really a family event." I looked at her. "I'm the one who paid for this," I said, keeping my voice level. "I know, and we're so grateful," she said, still smiling. "But it would be a little awkward, you know. These are my girlfriends. It changed the vibe." You understand. Someone nearby had gone very still. I could feel the attention of the room even though most people were pretending not to watch. "Where's Daniel?" I asked. "He's not here. It's a girls' thing." A pause. "I really think it would be better if you headed out. We'll celebrate with you at the rehearsal dinner, I promise." I stood there for a moment. I looked at the peonies I had ordered. I looked at the dessert table I had arranged. I looked at the dirt table I had arranged. I looked at the gift bags I had spent 2 evenings assembling, lined up neatly by the door. I said, "Okay." I turned around and walked out. I sat in my car for 4 minutes. I know it was 4 minutes because I watched the clock. Then I took my phone out of my purse and I called the venue coordinator, a woman named Patricia, who had been professional and warm throughout the entire booking process. "Patricia," I said, "I need to discuss the payment arrangement for today's event." She was confused at first. I explained calmly that I was the one who had made the reservation, signed the agreement, and paid the deposit. I asked her what the cancellation and refund situation looked like, given that the event was in progress. She put me on hold. She came back and explained that because I was the account holder, I had certain rights regarding the arrangement. The minimum spend charge would still apply. That was in the contract. But I could withdraw any additional authorization and dispute supplementary charges. I told her I wanted to do exactly that. I thanked her and hung up. Then I opened my email. Over the past 14 months, I had paid vendors directly. The florist for the wedding, not the shower, the actual wedding, had my card on file for the remaining balance. So did the wedding venue. So did the caterer. So did the string quartet Kristen had hired for the cocktail hour. I had never transferred these responsibilities to Daniel or Kristen because they had always just sent me the invoices and I had always just paid them. The accounts were in my name. The payment authorizations were mine. I called the wedding florist first. I explained that I was reviewing my financial commitments and needed to discuss the outstanding balance. I asked whether the final floral order had been confirmed and locked in. It had not. There was a balance due in 3 weeks. I told them to put it on hold pending further instruction. I called the wedding venue. Same conversation. The final balance was due in 2 weeks. I told them I would be in touch before then and asked them to note on the account that no further charges should be processed without my explicit confirmation. I called the caterer. I called the rental company, handling the chairs and linens. I called the parking attendant service Kristen had insisted on for the guest experience. 7 calls, 45 minutes. I drove home. I made a cup of tea. I sat at my kitchen table with my legal pad and I wrote down every dollar I had spent in the last 14 months. Every invoice, every transfer, every charge. Then I opened a new document on my laptop and I started writing a letter. Not to Kristen, to Daniel. I wrote for a long time. I told him what had happened that morning. I told him the total I had paid, the full $31,400. And I told him that I had done it willingly, out of love, and that I did not regret loving him. But I also told him something I had been carrying for almost 2 years, something I had decided when he called me to tell me he was engaged, that I would give him as a wedding gift. His father had left when Daniel was 9. What Daniel did not know, what I had never told him because I did not want to poison his childhood with adult grief, was that before his father left, he had emptied a joint savings account that I had been quietly building for Daniel's future. College money. A start in my fund. His father took $18,000 and I never saw it again. Over the following 20 years, I had rebuilt it. Quietly, carefully, a little at a time. By the time Daniel got engaged, I had saved $41,000 in an account I kept separate, in Daniel's name, waiting for the right moment. I had planned to give it to him at the wedding. A check, an envelope, a letter explaining where it came from and what it meant. I was not doing that now. In my letter to Daniel, I told him about the account. I told him about this father. I told him all of it the way I should have told him years ago. And I told him that I loved him with my whole life, but that I would not fund a future with a woman who had asked me to leave a room I had paid for in front of strangers without a second thought. I sealed the letter in an envelope and I set it on my kitchen counter. Daniel called me that evening. Kristen had clearly told him something, probably not the whole truth, but enough that he knew something had shifted. His voice was careful when I answered. "Mom, what's going on?" "I think you should come over," I said. "There are some things I need to tell you." He came alone. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, and I watched his face change as I talked. When I told him about the shower, he went still. When I told him about the $31,400, he looked sick. When I told him about the vendors, the holds I had put on the accounts, he closed his eyes. "Mom," he said quietly, "the wedding is in 6 weeks. I know. You can't just—" "Daniel." I kept my voice gentle. "I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing this because I need you to understand what has been happening, not to me as a guest at a party, but over the last 1.5 years. The invoices, the decisions made without me, being told to leave a room I booked, that I paid for, in front of her friends, because I would change the vibe." He didn't say anything. "I need you to talk to me," I said. "Not later, tonight. I need to know that you see what I'm telling you. What happened over the following 2 hours was the hardest conversation we had ever had." Daniel was defensive at first, then quiet. Then slowly, something in him started to open up. He told me things I hadn't known. That Kristen managed their finances almost entirely. That he had assumed I was contributing the amounts I'd agreed to and hadn't looked closely at the invoices. That he genuinely hadn't known the total had gone past $31,000. I believed him. My son is not a cruel person. He was a person who had let himself look away from things that were uncomfortable to see. I slid the envelope across the table. He read the letters slowly. When he got to the part about his father and the savings account, he set the papers down and he cried. The quiet, controlled kind of crying that men do when they're trying not to. I put my hand over his. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. "Because you were 9, and then you were 12. And then you were 18 and heading off to college, and I didn't want that story to be part of how you started your adult life. And the money? The $41,000? "It's still there," I said. "It has your name on it. That doesn't change." He looked up at me. "But how I give it and when, that depends on some things," I said. "It depends on whether the person you're choosing to build a life with is someone who is capable of treating me with basic dignity. Not deference. Not special treatment, Dignity. Daniel was quiet for a long time. "I need to talk to Kristen," he said finally. "I know you do." He left around 10 o'clock. I sat in my kitchen and I felt something I hadn't felt in 14 months. Not relief exactly, but the solid, steady sensation of standing on my own ground again. The conversations that followed between Daniel and Kristen were not easy, and they were not fast, and I was not part of them. I learned what I learned from Daniel in the days that followed. I learned that Kristen had not told him about the shower. I learned that she had told her friends that his mother was controlling and difficult. I learned that when Daniel confronted her about the invoices, about the total I had paid, she had said she thought I could afford it, so it wasn't really a problem. He told her it was a problem. I don't know everything that was said. What I know is that 2 weeks later, Kristen came to my house alone. She sat across from me at the same kitchen table where Daniel had sat. She did not look comfortable. She looked like a woman who had prepared a speech and was deciding how much of it to use. She told me she was sorry. She said she had not been fair to me. She said she had told herself that because I wasn't the one planning the wedding, I wouldn't have feelings about the choices being made. And she understood now that that was wrong. She said the shower had been a mistake and that she should have handled it differently. It was not the most thorough apology I had ever received, but she said it to my face without prompting from Daniel, and she stayed in her chair through the whole thing. I told her I appreciated her coming. I told her I did not need her to be my best friend. I told her I needed to know that when she looked at me, she saw Daniel's mother, someone who had poured her life into raising the man Kristen loved, and not just a financial resource to be managed from a comfortable distance. She nodded. She said she understood. I told her I hoped she did. The wedding happened on a Saturday in late October. The leaves had turned. The garden venue looked exactly as beautiful as Kristen had envisioned it. And I was there at the table with my sister and Daniel's godmother, in a different blue dress, watching my son get married. The vendors had been reinstated. I had made the calls myself, in the same calm voice I had used to put the holds in place. I paid the final balances. I signed the checks. I did it because I loved Daniel, and because Kristen had sat at my kitchen table and said she was sorry, and because sometimes love means choosing the harder, slower road over the satisfying one. I danced with my son at the reception. He held me in the way he used to when he was small, arms a little too tight, head slightly down. He said into my shoulder, "Thank you for not walking away." "I never walked away," I said. "I just stopped walking in a direction that wasn't mine." Things are not perfect. They are honest, which I think is better. Kristen and I have had awkward dinners and stiff conversations and moments where I can see her remembering the version of me she preferred, the one who just said yes and sent the money. I can see her adjusting. I am adjusting too. The $41,000 is still in the account with Daniel's name on it. I am thinking about what we might do with it together. Maybe a down payment on a house one day or a fund for whatever comes next in their life. I haven't decided yet, but I am the one who gets to decide. That part I am clear on. When I think about that morning, the shower, the peonies, the room I had paid for, Kristen's quiet smile as she asked me to leave, I don't feel the fury I felt in the first weeks afterward. What I feel now is something closer to gratitude, because what I'm about to tell you, as it was, gave me a reason to stop being silent, to stop pressing my own needs flat so that everyone around me could stand up straighter. I am 63 years old. I raised a child alone. I worked 2 jobs and paid off a mortgage and rebuilt a savings account my ex-husband emptied when I was 37 years old. I ironed a blue dress and curled my hair and drove across town to celebrate someone I barely knew because the woman my son loves had asked me to. I will not be asked to leave again, not from any room, not from any table, not from my own life. And if you are watching this and you recognize any part of what I went through, the slow erosion, the invoices, the feeling of being managed rather than loved, I want you to know that it is never too late to put your hand on the table and say, "This is what I will do, and this is what I will not." Quietly, clearly, without apology. That is not cruelty. That is dignity. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this story stayed with you, Please share it with someone who might need to hear it today. And if you've been through something like this yourself, as a parent, as a mother, as someone who gave and found themselves standing alone in a parking lot wondering how they got there, leave a comment below. I read every single one. You are not as alone in this as it feels right now. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you in the next story.